So we come now to the oceans and what's happening in our EEZ, or Z, whichever you prefer. It is the fourth largest in the world, a submerged continent, as we heard yesterday. We have 4 speakers. The session has been sponsored by BTW Givet Bukulim. I may not have mentioned that. And then again, I may have. And we are going to be looking at the EEZ and Continental Shelf Environmental Effects Act 2012, intended to protect oceans from harm of the like that might occur with exploration or production, drilling and the like. Is it good enough? Yes or no? Is it effective? Yes or no? 4 speakers will pursue these matters. They have 20 minutes each. I'll give them a warning bell at 15, another at 19, and a wrap at 20. First speaker is the inaugural CEO of the EPA and has been since July 2011. He had previously been the CEO for IRMA, or of IRMA, for 6 years, and prior to that as well, he worked for a long time at the Wellington Regional Council, where rumour has it he drove Fran wild. He sees the new act as gap-filling legislation. Some people call it the RMA at sea. He says not so. What is it? How is it working? Would you please welcome the CEO of the EPA, Rob Forlong.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I always feel that I should come out to Rocky music when Jim introduces me. It's pretty impressive, far more impressive, I suspect, than I am. Just a couple of things, just a few thank yous to people. Lauren, who organised us, herded us cats, and it was herding cats, to get this presentation underway. And I'd just also like to thank Gemma down there, Gemma Cousins from the EPA, who did the heavy lifting for this talk. And I've got to say, if there's a cock-up in it, it's almost certainly the slide that I changed. So we'll see how we go. What I just want to do briefly is run through what the EEZ Act's about, the Environmental Protection Authority ourselves, the activities and the regulators within the EEZ, the fact that it is gap-filling legislation. Then I'll talk to you a little bit about what we expect out of particularly applicants, but also a little bit about the submission process and how we're intending to make decisions. The EPA is a national level environmental regulator. We've got a number of responsibilities. One of them is we run the registry for the emissions trading scheme. We regulate new organisms, which is everything from genetically modified organisms to that lovely dung beetle you can see there, and zoo animals and new crops and things like that. We also regulate hazardous substances, and that ranges from the chemicals under your sink to pesticides to fireworks. This time of the year is always a lot of fun for us as the fireworks shipments start coming in, and even tattoo inks and things like that. We also assist the boards of inquiry for the independent boards of inquiry for the RMA nationally significant proposals, and we regulate the exclusive economic zone, which is what today's all about. You will have seen this slide. Most of the stuff you already know about. I googled Australia, the size of Australia. It's actually half the size of the continent of Australia, so it's a massive area, but there's actually not that much going on. Shipping and fishing appear to be the 2 main activities that are going on. We've got oil and gas exploration in the Taranaki Basin, 4 platforms, 2 floating petroleum storage offload vessels, and apparently we've had about 200 wells drilled in that 3.8 million square kilometres up to 2012. So there's a vast area with lots of real estate and not a lot of things happening in it. So the EEZ, and this is, if there's one message I want you to get out of this, the EEZ legislation ain't the RMA. It does have a similar purpose, but it's very different. It's nowhere near as comprehensive as the RMA, which covers most sorts of activities. It's very broad in its application, and of course for publicly managed resources like water, it covers resource allocation. The EEZ is gap filling. It's much narrower in its application, and it doesn't cover probably the 2 main activities that are going on in the EEZ, which is shipping and fishing. Just to come through, this is the regulatory jigsaw, you could call it, of the EEZ. and I don't know that I've even got them all in there, but there are 5 regulators who are talking regularly about how we're going to manage this thing. Resource allocation is done by New Zealand Petroleum Minerals. Dave Binney spoke to you yesterday. Health and safety is done by, now this group's had so many names, I'll try and run through them, but the health and safety group of MB, and the part of that is the high hazards unit. If you think DOL, if you think WorkSafe New Zealand, it's all the same bunch of people, so they just seem to get a different name about every 6 months, but they deal with health and safety, well integrity, those sorts of things. And oil spill response is dealt with by Maritime New Zealand. And shortly we're going to get the responsibility for dealing with discharges and dumping. So there's a huge regulatory jigsaw there, 5 agencies all working together, and the key thing for us in the lead up to this, and certainly in the implementation to this, is going to be about avoiding gaps and overlaps. And I suspect the easy part for us will be avoiding gaps. The hard part for us is going to be avoiding overlaps, because there are significant areas of potential overlap in there. We're doing a lot of talking now, but of course all that action will really hit the road when we get our first consent application in and we start having something real to deal with. Now, if I just bring this down to a couple of examples, and I've already apologised to the offshore miner I know who's in the room. I'm just going to characterise it in a very simple way. When you're mining offshore, you slurp a whole lot of material off the seabed. You bring it up to the surface usually, sort out what you want, and then send the other stuff back down. Now, I know it's more complicated than that, but that's a broad aspect of how it works. And so what we're interested in here is the damage to the marine habitats, potentially as you pull the material off the seabed, the sediment in the water column, and the discharges that come out off the vessel. And again, I've set out there all the agencies that are involved, and how we're going to go about that is going to be really interesting. The big thing about this is there has been a significant gap that the EEZ Act has had to fill in that space, because a lot of those environmental effects probably weren't that well covered previously. So there wasn't too much to deal with the discharge into the water column, although the discharge and dumping regs did some of that. Certainly not the slurping up of the seabed and things like that. So there was a significant gap. But the other thing about this is very similar to your RMA paradigm that most people work with, in that you're managing adverse effects. So you're thinking about avoiding, remedying, mitigating adverse effect, what sort of controls might go on to do that. Pretty relatively straightforward. What complicates it, of course, is you're 12 to 200 miles offshore and under however many metres of water, so you don't actually know a lot about what's going on, and you don't know a lot about the processes. So there are some complexities there that you probably don't get on land, but it's broadly the same thought processes that go through assessing these things. When you come to oil and gas, it's completely different. And again, if I can crudely characterise oil and gas drilling, you're drilling a 3-foot wide diameter hole in the ground, and as part of that, you'll be discharging some drilling drilling cuttings back into the water column and onto the seabed. And of course, you've got an industrial facility above it, so there's potential for discharges from that. That's assuming nothing goes wrong. And at that level, you're looking at the adverse effects. But again, what we're all worried about with offshore drilling is those accidents and looking at risk. So what we're not so worried so much about the drill cuttings that are going down, but what we're really worried about is there might be a blowout and a consequent oil spill, and that's the issue around petroleum effects, petroleum drilling. So as an organisation, what we're thinking about there is about risks, or as a group of regulators, we're thinking about risks, because we all have a part to play in this, of all those agencies I showed you. And that's a different thought process and a different paradigm to dealing with effects, because you're thinking of something that's low probability but massively high consequence. And how do you avoid it happening? If it happens, all hell breaks loose. You're trying to stop it from happening rather than manage the effects of it. Except for poor old Maritime New Zealand, who are the ones who are responsible for helping clean up and doing the oil spill response, which would be a huge job. And this is much more similar to what we do under HASNO, where we are assessing the risks, of introducing a new organism or introducing a new chemical into the country. And having worked in RMA and having worked in HASNO, you do actually have to think about it in a different way, and think about your controls in a different way. Now, the good news is that the gaps in petroleum drilling and exploration probably aren't as big as they are for mining, because since 1999 at least, there have been regulations in place designed to prevent those blowouts and the consequent oil spill. So they're done with under health and safety. This is the BP, the Macondo plant As you can see, and you all know what sort of a mess that made. These things are about health and safety, and quite a number of people died on that plant. But they are there, they have been there for a while. So what we're looking at again as a group of regulators is what we might need to do to add to those or assist to make that risk even smaller. Just moving on to the EPA. Look, we're arm's length from the government. We're a Crown entity, and so we're not behoving to ministers. You will see from time to time people saying that particularly boards of inquiry are appointed by ministers, so therefore, well, they're never actually brave enough to say they're biased, are they? But that's the implication that's made, that they might not be partial. Quite frankly, that's rubbish, and I suppose the easiest way to illustrate that is those boards are chaired by either Environment Court judges or retired High Court judges, and I don't know that anyone in this room would ever comprehend a judge forsaking their judicial independence just because they've been given a job by a minister. It's quite plainly absurd. But anyway, that's the way it is. We are at arm's length. And the other piece of information to help you understand that is I've been working in this area of being a Crown entity regulator for government now for 8 years, and I've never had a minister try and interfere in a decision. I've had them say, good thing it's your job and not mine, but I've never had a minister try and interfere in a decision. We're the consenting authority. We deal with permitted activities, and of course we assess the impacts and deal with the notified, and I'll come on to the non-notified as well activities. But the big role for us that's relatively new in our space, because traditionally we have been a consenting authority, traditionally after 2 years of existence, we have been a consenting authority, is the compliance role, and we'll have a significant compliance role in here. That means we're going to have inspectors on rigs and on mining ships and things like that, and some of them are about to undergo their health and safety training. And I'm told that in the health and safety training for going on a rig, they drop you in the water and you've got to wait 15 seconds in freezing cold water before you're allowed to escape the fake helicopter that you've been dropped in the water for. It's pretty demanding stuff.
Upside down as well.
Upside down as well. So quite,
Like a council meeting.
quite an important thing. Now moving on, notified, non-notified activities. We're all very familiar with notified activities, public submissions, and you're all aware that the government's introducing a non-notified process. Now, being a good civil servant, I don't want to comment whatsoever on what goes in non-notified. That's a matter for the government. Whatever they tell us, we'll live with, we'll work with. That's what we do. But I suppose what I would say to you is just imagine the RMA without a non-notified provision and how difficult that would be to work with. So I think the principle of having a non-notified provision is quite useful, and what goes in there is someone else's call, and as I say, we'll work with it. The other thing, couple of points to make about that non-notified process is that regardless of whether something's notified or non-notified, we'll do a technical assessment of it and assess the safety of it, the risks of it, the environmental effects. That's what we do, so that'll happen regardless. And I am seeing some criticism here that it'll be all done behind closed doors and no one will know what's going on. Well, we have non-notified processes for our HASNO Act. We publish the results up on our website. We publish the decisions, we publish the applications, and we'll do that with the EEZ as well. So the public will certainly know what's going on if they want to have a look. There's going to be no concealing of that sort of stuff. That'll all be up there and available for people. Interestingly enough, I'm currently under appeal for a non-notified decision in a HASNO context, so people can even find ways to appeal them. Coming on to the notification process, now obviously it's a public opportunity to comment, and one thing I will tell everyone who will listen is it's not a vote. Okay, the newspapers seem to think it's a vote. You'll get this thing saying, there were 300 submissions in support of this and you didn't do it, so therefore you're flying in the face of democracy or something like that. But it's not a vote, it's about soliciting information, and we're interested in information. So I always say it's what the submission says that's most important, not how many people say it. So one submission backed with really good information is more likely to have an effect than 1,000 submissions saying, I don't like this because. It's about the information, and it's something that's really, really important to us as decision makers to get the best information we can, and really, really crucial. Moving on to the decision makers. Look, the EPA, my board will appoint a decision-making committee. By law, one of my board members has to be on it. We'll also have experts. to assist in that decision making. And they'll seek to run what we call an inquisitorial process. So we've been really careful and clear with the decision makers is the crucial thing for them to do is extract the information they need to make a decision. And obviously they've got a fair amount of freedom about how they do that, but we don't want to see them refereeing a fight between lawyer A and lawyer B. Okay, we want them to be able to extract the information that they need to make a good decision. And we'll also seek to verify the assertions that are made. Often you'll see people coming up and making assertions, applicants and submitters, it's not just a submitter thing, and we'll try and find the data and the evidence behind that sort of assertion because it's all about information, this stuff. Moving back to a broader sort of a picture, look, the new reality for regulators now is, and just to explain some of those, Macondo's the BP thing, Montara is the Australian equivalent. The Australians had something similar. We've had leaky buildings, we've had Pike River, we've had workplace health and safety task forces. And the big lesson out of that for regulators across the nation, I think, is that if you get caught in that regulatory capture situation where you just let the people you regulate go for it on the assumption that they'll do the right thing, or you don't check out what they say, then you're going to share the blame if something goes pear-shaped. And that's been very clear in all those cases. Now, what I don't think too many people have got to grips with yet is that's going to involve a change in the way that we regulate in New Zealand, I think, over a period of time. We'll see it first in that health and safety space because of Pike River, it just has to happen. But I think we'll see it in the environmental space as well. And that is that regulators will probably be a little less flexible, a little tougher, a little more by the book, because they're much more exposed than I think they thought they were. So there's a strong expectation from the public and from industry as well that we'll police these rules diligently. And I always say to industry, yep, that's fine. I hear what you say, you want us to police these rules diligently. When you're the one who's about to be prosecuted, I'll remind you of that. And to be fair, so far they've been fine. None of them have been prosecuted yet, of course. But that's really, really important. So you're going to see a toughening of these rules, and we'll be part of that. So with that, bearing that in mind, look, our expectations of industry, of the people who are going to be doing these, putting these applications in and undertaking these operations, they've pretty much promised us international best practice, and that's what we expect. And I suppose we make sure we verify that. We have close relationships with the Australian regulator, in particular with NOPSEMA, who do the Australian regulation in oil and gas, and we've done some work with the Norwegians and the UK as well, so we'll be able to verify that it is international best practice. And it's fair to say that so far it hasn't been perfect. We've, under the transitional provisions, we've had 5 impact assessments provided to us. 4 of them have been accepted and 1 was rejected. So it hasn't been plain sailing. They might have been trying it on, but they won't try it on a second time, I don't think. And the other things that are really important for us, I think the point that Dave Binney made yesterday about New Zealanders being very keen on consultation, we expect that to happen. We expect people to really talk to anyone who might be involved and get that engagement going at an early space, and particularly to Māori. Māori are intimately involved in this simply because of part of the Act refers to the Treaty of Waitangi Settlement Act, what is called the Sea Law deal, and so they're in the middle of pretty much everything here. And existing interests in ourselves, obviously, so that we can give them some advice on what might be the best way to do this. And the other thing, coming back to this issue about information, the impact assessment conclusions have got to be best backed up by good data and the best information available. Not just we think so, we're really good, we're really impressive, so you need to believe what we say. So just to recap, look, there are multiple regulators and multiple pieces of legislation in the EEZ. This Act at the moment, these pieces of legislation that have gone through their gap filling, but all of those pieces have to fit together in the jigsaw, and all the regulators need to work together, and we've been working together on that to make sure that we don't have any gaps or any overlaps if we can avoid it. And this issue is all about information, providing the best information we can, making the best decisions we can, taking the best risk management practices we can, and dealing with all those applications in that way. So that's
19 minutes.
Perfect. That's all I had to say.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, thank you very much, Rob. Thank you so much.